In today's world, everything's in motion, and nations are constantly having to rewrite their playbooks. So today, we're diving into India's story. It's a fascinating one because India is charting a really bold, independent course, moving away from those old alliances of the past. It's forging a new path, and it's all about strategic partnerships, calculated risks, and a laser-like focus on its own national interests. So, let's break down this new playbook. So what does a modern partnership actually look like? Well, sometimes it looks like this, $100 billion. That is a staggering number. But this isn't some kind of foreign aid. Nope. This is a strategic investment from the 4 FTA nations. We're talking Switzerland, Norway, Iceland, and Liechtenstein, pledged over the next 15 years. This deal is really a powerful symbol of India's new economic diplomacy, where opening up its huge market is now directly tied to real long-term investment.
All right, so to really get our heads around this evolving playbook, here's how we're going to break it down. First, we'll look at India's new trade offensive. Then, we'll walk the really tricky US-India Tightrope, a relationship that's full of cooperation and friction. After that, we'll shift our focus to the Indian Ocean chessboard to see how India is securing its own backyard. And finally, we'll tie it all together to understand what its multi-aligned future really means.
Okay, let's kick things off with trade. See, India is on a mission. It wants to embed itself way deeper into the global economy and become a true manufacturing powerhouse. And the main tool it's using to get there? A whole series of really ambitious free trade agreements, or FTAs. The whole point is to crack open new markets and bring in massive investment.
And this trade offensive is happening on all fronts at once. That TPE agreement with the EFTA countries, that's a landmark deal, linking market access directly to investment. Then you've got the UK, where a major deal will get rid of duties on 99% of Indian exports. Negotiations with the European Union, India's second biggest trading partner, are also moving right along. And way over in the Pacific, with New Zealand, India has locked in a deal for zero duty on all its exports. It's a very clear, multi-pronged strategy to get more diverse economic partners. So what do these deals actually look like on the inside? Let's take the UK agreement as a perfect example. If you look at this table, you can see the give and take. On the good side, the UK drops tariffs on key Indian exports like textiles. But India plays defense, making sure sensitive sectors like dairy are protected. For services, India is opening up fields like finance, but broader visa access for its IT professionals, that was a no-go. And for investment, UK firms get a huge win with access to Indian government contracts. It's just a classic negotiation, right? A delicate balancing act.
But, as India opens up, new challenges pop up. And a big one is the EU's Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, or CBAM. So what is it? Well, think of it as a carbon tax on imports. If a product is made in a country with weaker carbon rules than the EU, the importer has to pay extra. This is a huge deal for Indian exporters, since over 15% of India's goods go to the EU. Sectors like steel and aluminum are going to get hit hard. And while other countries have fought this at the WTO, India's just raised objections so far, making this a major hurdle in a really complex trade relationship. Okay, so from all that economic maneuvering in Europe, we're now going to turn to maybe the most complex relationship of all, the one with the United States. This isn't a simple story of friends or rivals. It's both, happening at the same time. India and the US are walking a serious tightrope, trying to balance deep strategic alignment with some pretty sharp economic conflict. And this slide just perfectly captures that duality, that split personality. On one side of the scale, the US has labeled India a major defense partner, which makes it easier to share technology and sell defense equipment. They're working together on everything from critical minerals to subsea cables. But then, on the other side, the US has slapped these huge 50% tariffs on key Indian exports like steel and aluminum. It's a partnership that's running on two completely different and sometimes contradictory tracks.
And these tariffs aren't just some abstract policy. They have a massive real-world impact. We are talking about nearly $11 billion in textiles, $10 billion in diamonds and jewelry, and almost $7 billion in machinery. And a huge chunk of these exporters, especially in areas like gems and handicrafts, are small and medium-sized businesses. For them, a sudden 50% tariff can be absolutely devastating. It threatens livelihoods all across states like Gujarat, Rajasthan, and Maharashtra.
So why all the friction? A lot of it comes down to a fundamental clash over how you see the world economically. This isn't just about numbers. The US looks at the official data, sees a nearly $50 billion deficit in goods, and cries foul. But India's argument is that this picture is totally incomplete. Why? Because it leaves out services, like IT and finance, where the US actually makes a lot of money.
If you factor in services and arms sales, India argues the US actually has a $35 to $40 billion surplus. It's a basic disagreement over how to do the math, and it fuels the entire conflict. Now, let's flip the coin, because despite all those tariff battles, the strategic cooperation here is deeper than it has ever been. The trust framework is all about building secure tech supply chains. Both countries are in the Mineral Security Partnership to become less dependent on China for critical minerals. They're working together on India's ambitious nuclear energy goals. And in defense, well, the partnership is anchored by these foundational agreements, LAMOA, COMCASA, and BICA, that allow for deep military cooperation, like refueling at each other's bases and using secure communication networks.
So, India's global playbook isn't just about managing relationships with the big powers like the US and Europe. A really crucial part of its strategy is securing its own neighborhood, the huge and strategically vital Indian Ocean. And here, India is playing a long game, a very complex game of geopolitical chess. And right at the center of this chessboard is this chain of islands, the Chagos Archipelago. It might look small, but believe me, its location is everything. It's sitting right in the middle of the Indian Ocean, and its biggest island, Diego Garcia, hosts a massive joint US-UK military base. This base has been critical for Western military operations for decades, so for India, whatever happens here is incredibly important.
The history here is long and pretty contentious. The islands were ceded by France to Britain way back in 1814. Then, in 1965, the UK basically carved the islands off from Mauritius to use them for military purposes. So when Mauritius got its independence, the UK held on to Chagos. But now, after decades of dispute, there's been a breakthrough. The UK has agreed to transfer sovereignty to Mauritius. But, and this is a huge but, the UK and US get to keep the Diego Garcia base under a 99-year lease, and the deal says the original inhabitants can't resettle there.
So where does India fit into all of this? Well, while the UK and Mauritius are sorting out the sovereignty issue, India has been quietly and steadily deepening its own partnership with Mauritius. And this isn't just about geopolitics. India set up its first ever overseas Jan Aushadhi Kendra there, which is a store that provides affordable generic medicines. It's also funding major infrastructure projects. This mix of strategic interest and development partnership is really a hallmark of India's neighborhood policy.
Okay, so we've looked at trade, that complex US relationship, and the regional strategy. So now let's pull all these threads together. What does it all mean? Well, it points to a really clear and deliberate evolution in India's foreign policy, a new doctrine for a new era.
This quote just perfectly captures the shift. During the Cold War, India championed non-alignment. Today, that has evolved into multi-alignment. And the crucial point here is that this isn't about being neutral or passive. It is about being actively engaged with everyone. It means you can work with the US on defense, sign a massive trade deal with European nations, and at the same time build strong partnerships in your own neighborhood. It's a totally pragmatic, flexible approach where the bottom line is always advancing India's own interests.
And that leaves us with a final critical question. This multi-alignment strategy works really well in a world of shifting dynamics. But as geopolitical tensions get worse and powers like the US increasingly demand that nations pick a side, can this delicate balancing act actually hold? Can India continue to be a partner to all without being a formal ally to any? That right there is the great strategic challenge